Welcome to the Eye Protection Awareness Training. How long does it take you to blink? Just a split second, right? When something is flying your way, you automatically blink without even having to think about it. But sometimes our reflexes just aren't fast enough. Unfortunately, that split second is all it takes for an eye injury, infection, or even blindness to occur. About 2,000 workers in the U.S. experience some sort of eye injury each day, and thousands are blinded each year from work-related eye injuries that could have been prevented with the proper selection and use of eye and face protection. OSHA requires employers to ensure the safety of all employees in the work environment. Eye and face protection must be provided whenever necessary to protect against chemical, environmental, radiological, or mechanical irritants and hazards. This training is designed to familiarize you with the wide selection of eye and face protection available so that you are able to properly select and use the appropriate protection for the hazards you face at the workplace. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, for the eyes and face is designed to prevent or lessen the severity of injuries to workers when engineering or administrative controls are not feasible or effective in reducing these exposures to acceptable levels. The first step in selecting the proper PPE is to analyze the hazards you face. Your employer should periodically conduct a hazard assessment of the workplace in order to determine the proper types of PPE to prevent eye injuries. This hazard assessment must be documented with a written certification of hazard assessment that identifies the workplace evaluated, the person certifying that the evaluation has been performed, and the date of the hazard assessment. Using the information from the assessment, your employer will select and have each affected employee use the types of PPE that will protect the affected employees from the hazards identified. Suitable eye and face protection selected for employees must at least protect against specific workplace hazards, fit properly and be reasonably comfortable to wear, provide unrestricted vision and movement, be durable and cleanable, and allow unrestricted functioning of any other required PPE. In addition, the eye and face protection selected must clearly identify the manufacturer and comply with any of the following American National Standards Institute, or ANSI standards, all of which are incorporated by reference in 29 CFR 1926.6. ANSI ISEA Z87.1 2010, Occupational and Educational Personal Eye and Face Protection Devices. ANSI Z87.1 2003, Occupational and Educational Personal Eye and Face Protection Devices, or ANSI Z87.1 1989 R 1998, Practice for Occupational and Educational Eye and Face Protection. If your employer can demonstrate that other personal eye and face protective devices are at least as effective as those constructed in accordance with one of the above consensus standards, that equipment will be deemed acceptable. It is important to note that everyday use of prescription corrective lenses will not provide adequate protection against most occupational eye and face hazards. Employees with corrective lenses may either wear eye protection that incorporates the prescription into the design or wear additional eye protection over their prescription lenses. The protective eyewear should not disturb the proper positioning of the prescription lenses so that the employee's vision will not be inhibited or limited. Protective eyewear with incorporated corrective lenses may be used only by the employee for whom the corrective prescription was issued and may not be shared among employees. Also, employees who wear contact lenses must wear eye or face PPE when working in hazardous conditions. Now that you are familiar with the general requirements for eye and face protection devices, let's examine the specifics of the different forms of safety equipment. We'll begin with safety glasses. Safety glasses are intended to shield the wearer's eyes from impact hazards such as flying fragments, objects, large chips, and particles. Workers are required to use safety glasses with side shields when there is a hazard from flying objects. Side shields may be incorporated into the frames of safety glasses when needed. Glasses without side shields are not acceptable eye protection for impact hazards. The next protective device on our list is safety goggles. Much like safety glasses, safety goggles are intended to shield the wearer's eyes from impact hazards such as flying fragments, objects, large chips, and particles. However, unlike glasses, goggles form a protective seal on the face immediately surrounding the eyes. This prevents objects from entering under or around the goggles. Pay attention to the following items about lenses, ventilation, and frame options when selecting safety goggles. Clear safety goggle lenses may incorporate a prescription and/or be removable in some goggles, but they will not provide special protection against optical radiation. Ventilated goggles prevent lenses from fogging by allowing air circulation while providing protection against airborne particles, dust, liquids, or light. Regardless of the type of lens or ventilation, all safety goggle frames must be properly fitted to the worker's face to form a protective seal around the eyes. Poorly fitted goggles will not offer the necessary protection. Face shields, the next kind of PPE to discuss, are intended to protect not only the eyes, but the entire face or portions of it. When worn alone, face shields do not provide sufficient eye protection from impact hazards such as flying fragments, objects, large chips, and particles. Face shields must be used in combination with safety glasses or goggles, even in the absence of dust or potential splashes, for protection from impact hazards. Face shield window and headgear devices are available in various combinations to enable the worker to select the appropriate equipment. Face shield windows extend from the brow to below the chin and across the entire width of the face. They are made with different transparent materials and in varying degrees or levels of thickness. These levels should correspond with specific tasks to be performed. The window of the face shield is supported and secured to the head by headgear. Adjustable headgear includes straps that allow the user to manipulate the size of the headgear to ensure a proper fit. This eye protection training continues with welding protectors. Welding protectors are constructed of heat-resistant materials such as vulcanized fiber or fiberglass and fitted with a filtered lens to protect workers' eyes from burns caused by infrared or other intense radiant energy. The next series of pages will cover the different features of welding protection. Only filter lenses with the appropriate shade number will provide protection against optical radiation produced by welding, cutting, and brazing. Filter lenses vary in thickness and shade depending on the specific type of welding, cutting, brazing, or soldering to be performed. Lenses must coincide with specific radiant energy exposure. OSHA provides a minimum protective shade number for each type of optical radiation hazard. ANSI and American Welding Society also provide shade number recommendations, which are generally greater than the minimum required by OSHA. When selecting filter lenses, begin with a shade too dark to see the welding zone. Then try lighter shades until one allows a sufficient view of the welding zone without going below the minimum protective shade. During oxygen gas welding or cutting, where the torch produces a high yellow light, it is desirable to use a filter lens that absorbs the yellow in the visible light of the operation. Welding goggles use filter lenses to protect the eyes from optical radiation. They are available in eye cup or cover types and include an adjustable strap. However, welding goggles do not provide face protection from flying sparks, metal spatter, and slag chips produced during welding, brazing, soldering, and cutting operations. Welding helmets, on the other hand, are intended to shield the eyes and face from optical radiation, heat, and impact. They are heat and electricity insulated and flame resistant. Welding helmets should be used in addition to primary protection such as safety glasses or goggles to provide adequate protection. Welding helmet windows may be stationary or lift front. Lift front windows include an adjustable feature, which allows the user to lift the window. They may include easily removable filter and cover plates and are also available in many filter lens shades. Adjustable headgear supports the window and secures the device to the worker's head. Handheld shields may be desired for certain welding operations that allow workers to hold their welding protection. They may include easily removable cover and filter plates that come in many shades. Like welders, workers with exposure to laser beams are at risk for eye injury from light radiation. They must be furnished suitable laser protection depending upon the lasers in use and the operating conditions. Lens selection should be based on the maximum power density or intensity lasers produce when workers are exposed to laser beams and the specific wavelength of the laser. They must be of sufficient optical density for the energy involved. Safety goggles intended for use with laser beams must be labeled with the laser wavelengths for which they are intended to be used, the optical density of those wavelengths, and the visible light transmission. To a much lesser extent than radiant energy from welding or laser operations, glare from natural or electrical light sources can cause eye injury in the workplace. Glare can be controlled with special purpose glasses that include a filter or tinted lenses to provide protection against eye strain. A visor-type shade will also help control glare. Alternately, changes can be made to the work area or lighting to minimize glare. The final class of eye protection to discuss is full-face respirators. If your work environment exposes you to chemicals, vapors, acid gases, dust, or welding fumes, you may be required to wear a full-face respirator for protection against respiratory hazards. In this case, the respirator's face shield will protect your eyes and face from irritants, contaminants, and impact. Remember that when a respirator is required, a written respiratory protection program must be implemented. The provisions of the program must include procedures for selection, medical evaluation, fit testing, training, use, and care of respirators.
Now, let's analyze a real-life case of an eye injury.
At 12 p.m. on May 16, 2017, a concrete construction company employee and his coworkers were installing a concrete garage floor measuring 20 feet wide and 22 feet 6 inches long. In order to ensure an even concrete pour, the employees were snapping chalk lines along the form walls of the garage and running strings between nails they were hammering into the garage form walls at the level of the chalk lines. Employee number 1 was using a handheld hammer to manually strike a nail and drive it into the concrete wall. He was not wearing safety glasses. A nail deflected and became a flying projectile, striking and embedding in his left eye. He manually pulled the nail out of his eye. Emergency services were called and he was transported to the hospital. His eye puncture wound was treated with laser eye surgery, an eye wash, and medication. He was fortunate to be released from the hospital the same day with an eye injury that only resulted in temporary nearsightedness. Some occupational eye injuries occur because employees are not wearing any eye protection, as demonstrated by the previous example, while others result from wearing improper or poorly fitting eye protection. Many workers aren't even aware of the potential hazards in their work environments, making them more vulnerable to injury. For this reason, employees who are required to use eye and face protection must be trained. The training must be comprehensive and understandable. It must include, at a minimum, the following: why the eye and face protection is necessary and how improper fit, use, or maintenance can compromise its protective effect. Limitations and capabilities of the eye and face protection. Effective use in emergency situations. How to inspect, put on, and remove PPE. Maintenance and storage of PPE. Recognition of medical signs and symptoms that may limit or prevent effective use, and general requirements of OSHA's eye and face protection standard. If your employer has reason to believe that any affected employee who has already been trained does not have the understanding and skill required, your employer must retrain the employee. Retraining is also required when changes in the workplace or changes in the types of eye protection to be used render previous training obsolete. So that you are aware of the importance of using your PPE, let's examine the different eye hazards you may face on the job and the appropriate PPE for each hazard type. Impact injury hazards are first on the list. Most impact injuries to the eye occur when small pieces of flying debris, such as dust, cement chips, metal slivers, or wood chips, impact or scrape the eye when they are ejected from tools, fall from above, or are blown by the wind. Impact injuries may also occur if the eye is struck by a larger object or a worker runs into something, making contact with the eyeball or eye socket. Some impacts result in a penetration. A penetration injury occurs when the eye is pierced with a nail, staple, or sliver of metal or wood. These types of injuries are more likely to result in permanent vision loss. While working in a hazardous area where you are exposed to flying objects, fragments, or particles, primary protective devices such as safety glasses with side shields or goggles must be worn. Secondary protective devices such as face shields are required in conjunction with primary protective devices during severe exposure to impact hazards. Next up are heat injury hazards. Heat injuries may occur to the eyes and face when workers are exposed to high temperatures, splashes of molten metal, or hot sparks during workplace operations involving pouring, casting, hot dipping, furnace operations, and other similar activities. Burns to eye and face tissue are the main concern when working with heat hazards. Working with heat hazards requires eye protection such as goggles or safety glasses with special purpose lenses and side shields. Many heat hazard exposures require the use of a face shield in addition to safety glasses or goggles. When selecting personal protective equipment, the source and intensity of the heat and the type of splashes that may occur in the workplace must be considered. A large percentage of eye injuries are caused by direct contact with industrial chemicals or cleaning products. Serious and irreversible damage may occur when chemical substances contact the eyes in the form of splash, mists, vapors, or fumes. These injuries often result from an inappropriate choice of personal protective equipment, one that allows a chemical substance to enter from, around, or under protective eye equipment. When fitted and worn correctly, goggles protect your eyes from hazardous substances. A face shield may also be required in areas where workers are exposed to severe chemical hazards. When working with or around chemicals, it is important to know the location of emergency eye wash stations and how to access them with restricted vision. Dust is another potential hazard for eye injury. Dust is present in the workplace during operations such as woodworking and buffing. Working in a dusty environment can cause eye injuries and presents additional hazards to contact lens wearers. Either eye cup or cover-type safety goggles should be worn when dust is present. Safety goggles are the only effective type of eye protection from nuisance dust because they create a protective seal around the eyes. Optical radiation is the final hazard on our list. Welding, laser work, and similar operations create intense concentrations of heat, ultraviolet, infrared, and reflected light radiation. The intensity of visible light and radiant energy produced by welding operations varies depending on the task, the electrode size, and the arc current. Workers involved in welding, cutting, and brazing operations must use appropriate welding protection depending on specific welding operations. A laser beam of sufficient power can produce intensities greater than those experienced when looking directly at the sun. Unprotected laser exposure may result in eye injuries including retinal burns, cataracts, and permanent blindness. Laser retinal burns can be painless, so it is essential that all personnel in or around laser operations wear appropriate eye protection at all times. Once the proper eye and face protection is selected for the hazard and fitted to the employee, it is important that it be properly maintained. Eye and face protection should be inspected and cleaned at regular intervals so that equipment provides the required protection. Cleaning is particularly important where dirty or fogged lenses could impair vision. It is also important to ensure that contaminated equipment, which cannot be decontaminated, is disposed of in a manner that protects employees from exposure to hazards. Care should be taken when storing eye protection. After disinfecting eyewear, the dry parts or items should be placed in a clean, dust-proof container, such as a box, bag, or plastic envelope, to protect them until needed again. Goggles should be kept in a case when not in use. Glasses, in particular, should be given the same care as one's own glasses, since the lenses, frame, nose pads, and temples can be damaged by rough usage. If, despite taking all the necessary precautions, an eye injury does occur, quick action can prevent a permanent disability. For this reason, first aid instructions should be posted close to potential danger spots. Emergency eye washes should be placed in all hazardous areas, and employees must know where the closest eye wash station is and how to get there with restricted vision. Per OSHA, first aid for eye injuries is limited to applying eye patches and removing foreign bodies from the eye using only irrigation or a cotton swab. Seek medical attention immediately if further intervention is required. We take our eyes and vision for granted until it's too late. At least 90% of workplace eye injuries can be prevented by the proper use of eye protection on the job. Use adequate eye protection 100% of the time and encourage your coworkers to do the same. Your eyes are worth protecting.